Fireside Chat, an engaging fireside chat on the changing philanthropic landscape in India. Is it beneficial for NPOs and India's development? The speakers: Shri Amit Chandra, Co-founder, A.T.E. Chandra Foundation and Chairperson, Bain Capital India Advisors. Shri Arjun Ranga, Managing Director, N. Ranga Rao and Sons Private Limited. Dr. Basavaraju R. Shrestha, Executive Director, GRAAM.
Fireside chat on the changing philanthropic landscape in India. Is it beneficial for NPOs or India's development? This chat features two prominent names in the field, Mr. Amit Chandra, co-founder of A.T.E. Chandra Foundation, and Mr. Arjun Ranga, Chairperson, Board of Trustees, GRAAM. Leading this conversation will be none other than our Executive Director, Dr. Basavaraju. I welcome our speakers to occupy the chairs on the stage. For the sake of time, I request Dr. Basavaraju to kindly order our speakers and take over. Subramaniam to come on stage and order our speakers.
Namaskara, Shubha Sanjay, Swagata. Good evening everyone, and thank you for joining us in this engaging conversation, the changing philanthropic landscape in India. As we all know, in the last decade, the philanthropic landscape is sort of taking a shift, wherein you are seeing more and more international funding is receding, or in other words, not growing the way it used to be. The stipulations and regulations, on the other hand, at the government is increasing, and amidst all these challenges, the good part is the domestic philanthropy is under rising spirit, as well as so as our corporate social responsibility. When this shift happens, normally the people either face challenges or take its opportunities are the non-profit sector. They are the major stakeholder who have a very critical and catalytic role when the philanthropic changes happens actually in the country. So with this, today we are fortunate to have our two distinguished speakers with us, Mr. Amit Chandra, a visionary philanthropist and a co-founder of A.T.E. Chandra Foundation, and Mr. Arjun Ranga, the Chairperson of Grassroots Research Advocacy Movement's Board of Trustees, as well as the MD of Ranga Rao and Sons, who himself, the family is a philanthropic, the family in fact in this side, this part of the country, so we would say. And with them actually, they'll share their insights on how philanthropy is shaping the fortune of non-profit organizations, the importance of impact measurements, and whether the grassroots organizations are better positioned to thrive this changing ecosystem. And we'll also explore whether the evolving expectations of donors are pushing non-profit organizations to innovate or merely cater to those expectations. All these discussions we are hoping to have, but before that, let me present you some statistics to give you a landscape of the philanthropic sector in India. As we all know, we are thriving to become a $5 trillion economy. India is saying that we'll be one of the top 5 or top 3 economy in the coming days, with the GDP and the growth rate, and India's economy growth remains robust. This strong GDP growth, budging middle class, and it strives to become a $5 trillion economy in the financial year 2025. The multidimensional inequalities and poverty continue to persist in India. Of course, with the recent discussion paper from the Niti Aayog released in 2024, India made a tremendous progress in reducing the multidimensional poverty, but of course it's from 29.17% to 11% in the 9 years when the expected goal is to reach 1%, to have 1% multi-dimensional poverty in the country. But we are still at 11% as per the official records of the government. And India's social sector spending as a percentage of GDP grew from 8.6% in the financial year 2021 to 9.6% in 2022, and due to 35% growth rate in public spending. But despite this progress, India remains well short of Niti Aayog's estimate to total annual funding required to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is 13% is the deficit what they have estimated. And of course, on the other hand, private philanthropy is required to step up and play a catalytic role in bridging the funding gap as well as the development gap in India. And we are also seeing the FCRA amendments in a way started impacting the country's philanthropic landscape. The private foreign giving dipped by almost 3% from financial year 2021 to 2022. In the last one fiscal year, it is dipped by 3%. And due to FCRA amendment, and the expected growth trajectory suggests that future growth may be affected by a global shift in funding priorities. And private philanthropy in India surged by 10% in financial year 2023. It's growing. And corporate social responsibility, family philanthropy, UHNI, HNI, and affluent individuals and retail giving cumulatively contributed to about 86% of private philanthropy in India and are expected to remain the foundation of private giving in India. And CSR spending is grown at 13% over the last 5 years, reaching 3.3 billion, that is in Indian rupees 27,000 crores in financial year 2022. While it grew a slower pace in 2022, we expect it to sustain its historical growth and reach 6.4 billion, that is 52,000 crores by 2027. With this background and all the statistical evidences we have to suggest that or to see there's a change happening in the philanthropic sector in India, it is important to discuss the various dimensions of it, how civil society is whether it's going to be benefited or not benefited, if they're really required to be benefited, what changes probably we may have to bring in within the civil society sector. Similarly, what role the philanthropist, the private sector have a role to play. So I'll start this conversation. I'll take, I think it will be more. Hello? Yeah. Sir, as I'll start the conversation, engaging a conversation with you, and as I try to give you the landscape scenario, and as well as some of the statistics with respect to the changing philanthropic landscape in India, how can grassroots organizations best position themselves to tap into growing domestic philanthropy and as well as the CSR opportunities in the country?
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. Namaskar to everyone. I really enjoyed the session before this, and many of the points that got covered there actually resonated with me. I'm essentially an optimist by nature, but I do understand the pain that many grassroots organizations go through for the simple reason that my wife herself runs a large NGO, the largest organization in the country that deals with intellectual disabilities. So there isn't a day or a night that passes that I don't land up having a conversation about the challenges of running an organization, particularly in a space that's really underserved and difficult. Now, with that backdrop, let me give you my perspective on some of the things that I heard and your question. I do understand that in the last 4 or 5 years there have been a number of challenges. Some of them you touched upon, some of them I heard in the room before. Burden of much greater compliances, requirements from under M&E, general decline in funding from one segment, which was essentially FCRA. And all of that, I think, has landed up dominating the discourse on the sector. However, my own perspective is that at this point of time, we are probably in the golden age of Indian philanthropy. And I don't say that as a loosely as a bite. I say that basically because there are a number of structural things which are happening, which if organizations really capture, and not every organization is going to be able to capture it, but if organizations really are able to capture it, I think they will truly be able to solve problems that we've tried really hard to solve since our independence. Now, what are those structural changes? If you look at the overall funding pie at this point of time, FCRA, for all the noise that we make about it, has somewhat declined over the last 5 years, and is now under 20% of the overall funding available, to the philanthropic sector. But it's massively dwarfed by a completely new pool of capital, which is CSR, which didn't exist a decade ago. Importantly, that pool of capital is growing at a rate of, 10 to 15%. And so the first time the social sector has a predictable pool of capital which is available, which was never the case earlier. And you can actually therefore go back and look at people who are planning ahead with a 2-3 year horizon and are laying capital out. And this number now is the largest source of capital amongst all the pools of capital. So I think this is very, very important. To solve any problem, you need predictable capital and you need large pools of it, and for the first time we actually have them. The second thing which has happened is that wealthy Indians have finally started giving money and this has happened after independence. Before independence, it used to happen. The Tatas gave away most of their wealth. They gave it up before independence. There were a few other families who wrote large checks, but it happened before independence. After independence, we've had in Bangalore, Mr. Premji set the example, but we haven't had many examples of Indians really giving back to solve our problems. But in the last 4-5 years, that has begun to happen. So finally, if you look at ultra high net worth giving and high net worth giving together, that's now almost 30,000 crores. So it's nearly 50% larger than FCRA money. And importantly, that number is also growing at between 10 and 20% a year. And I think actually can grow a lot more. So that's the second big mega trend. The third big mega trend is retail giving. If you look at the data, retail giving is also about 30,000 crores. So again, dwarfs FCRA giving. The challenge there is that a very small part of it actually goes to NGOs, which is what I guess all of us really care about. A lot of it goes to unorganized form of giving. And so it's not really going structurally to solve problems. And therefore what we really need to do is be imaginative and figure out how to capture it, right? But stepping back, we actually have, in all the noise that we talked about, if we find a way to address the requirements of compliance, of greater data, of transparency, that some of these new segments, require, we actually have large pools of capital available for the first time in many, many, many decades to solve our problems. And importantly, that capital is our own capital. It's Indian capital. It's not foreign capital. And so this is the golden age of philanthropy. That's wonderful.
think it's very difficult for single NGOs to go and try to solve problems. Let me put in perspective that there was an analysis done by Satwa, which I think is a Bangalore-based organization, which caught my attention, that if you look at the top 200 NGOs in India, the median budget of the top 200 NGOs is some number in the 20 crore range. So imagine, you're trying to solve the most important problems of our lifetime, far more important problems than what corporates are dealing with. And the 200 most important organizations have a 20 crore budget. It's like going and fighting, a battle with one of our neighbors along, with a cookery knife. I mean, it's completely a disproportionate battle. So what we really need to step back and think about is how are we going to fight these battles, be it issues of gender or education inequity or health or any of the big issues which have in some cases existed for centuries. And that requires reimagination of the way we work. It also requires reimagination of what the role of not-for-profits is. Now, for a long time, I personally believe that many not-for-profits have thought that the purpose of the organization is the purpose of the cause. Let me just pause and try to explain that. If we believe that the organization is more important than the cause, and I think because of that, we've had proliferation of lakhs of NGOs in the country. So the first question we've got to really ask ourselves is, are we trying to solve a problem or are we trying to build organizations? We've got to ask that question really, really hard, because I do believe that in many cases we need maybe fewer organizations and the same set of talent and resources needs to be in smaller number of well-resourced organizations, both with human capital and financial capital. It's a difficult decision because, often people put the organization before the cause, and it's a question of human behavior, but I think this is an important question we've got to ask even before it goes to collaboration. So this is the first question of reimagination in my mind that we need to ask ourselves. The second question of reimagination is the role of the NGO itself. Now, I think, NGOs cannot necessarily solve a problem by themselves. Why? Because to solve a problem, you require reach, you require a lot of capital, right? If you look at the total capital available with all the NGOs, which is essentially the philanthropic capital available in the country at this point of time, it is less than 2% of the capital available for the same social issues with the government, correct? Miraculously, if we became a much more giving society and doubled that overnight, it will become 3 or 4%. Even if the efficiency of that improves materially, it will become 5 or 6%. We still will not be able to solve the problem. Therefore, the best thing that we can do as not-for-profits is do things that the government cannot do, right? Which is, the government cannot take risk. The government is not nimble, so it cannot build good mousetraps, i.e. solutions, right? So what we need to do is really make sure that we are not replicating things that the government can do. We can do experimentation, we can create deliveries, solutions which governments cannot necessarily do. And then importantly, we can partner with the government to change their approach so that governments ultimately solve problems. This reimagination is very important. I was in Ladakh 2 weeks ago, and I saw the work being done by one organization, 17,000 feet, which basically went to Ladakh 20 years ago and pioneered how a solution which is a hardware come software solution can go and rebuild education in schools in frontier regions. That has now become a template for all Himalayan range schools, right? They cannot themselves do it in all the Himalayan areas, but become a template now which the government of India is adopting in its Vibrant Villages program, right? That in my mind is a good example. I can give you many examples I have seen where NGOs are building interesting templates which can get embedded into government programs. So I think we have to reimagine the role, and we have to think of these as partnerships between civil society and governments. And you know, in the previous conversation, the role of partnerships between NGOs also came up. Very important. I think there it is, you know, it's sometimes difficult for NGOs themselves to build these partnerships. So I do think it's the responsibility of people who are funders, who can act as system aggregators and try to, you know, bring people together who have capability in different areas. I mean, most of my work is with farmers. So one of the things we do is we bring people who have capability in different areas. We work with a organization that understands technology for, you know, for water, and we'll bring someone who has grassroots capabilities in delivery, and we'll bring someone who has M&E capability, and we'll weave the solution together so that ultimately you have a full solution for water. I think that is the role for players, you know, like ourselves. I know, you know, the Nilankanis do that a lot here. They're doing it with mental health, and I know a number of others do that in verticals that they're interested in. I think increasingly we need to see that happen, where people play the role of synthesizing organizations who have great capability in individual areas, and then getting them together to provide solutions which can get integrated into government programs. So I think we need to reimagine philanthropy, but I do believe that the collaborative part of it that you asked is critical, and that collaboration is on multiple dimensions. It is collaboration between NGOs, collaborations between foundations, and collaborations certainly with the government.
So what a really interesting thought. Basically, what I get from that, the entire thing is, this kitty, however it is small, but it should be used for innovation, used for experimentation, used for coming out with effective solutions actually, so that which can be probably taken up by government to scale and implement it across. But unfortunately, rather than ensuring collaboration in this way, many governments, in fact, directly reaching out to the corporate social responsibility organizations and philanthropists, demanding, not even expecting, demanding to invest on the core infrastructure development issues, for example, build schools, build toilets, that kind of mundane and regular things which otherwise should have been done by people's money through government's exchequer. So what's your thought and take on this?
Yeah, I scratch my head on that, and look, and I think, it's really unfortunate. There are companies who always fall, who feel the compelling need to succumb to such requests, and it's unfortunate that they do. But I do feel that it's a pity, because it takes away money from what could actually have gone to the social sector to do the kind of things that I talked about. I just want to make one clarification. What I am suggesting is that not all money go towards simply experimentation, etc. Because look, there are two other important functions that I think NGOs fill. One is, governments are like elephants, okay, and when elephants dance, they do not cover the whole room. So there are large parts of a room which are uncovered, right, and which are basically missing gaps, and those can only be filled in any sector by small organizations. So I think it's very important that those last miles be filled by someone who's local, and I think that's a very important function. So I think that's one area which is important to recognize. The other is advocacy. You always need someone who's stepping back and who's observing and who's advocating. And I think so. I do want to say that when I'm saying reimagine, I'm not saying for a moment that those two things should be neglected.
Yeah. And now another major segment, and in other words, the challenge the NPO sector is facing is the increasing focus on impact measurement and compliance. While it is good, like as Dr. said, it is not, things which are not measured or not managed, but it's important to measure the impact. But many small and grassroots organizations are struggling to keep up. Although they might be doing an impactful work, but to show it, they are doing an impactful work. How can large-scale donors and CSR arms provide more than just financial support and offer them such capacity building as well as help these organizations to adapt to these expectations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it is an imperative for both large donors to fund capacity building in the country. I mean, we were probably the first major donor to build a capacity building vertical when we did in 15 years ago, and I don't think we built it because of vision. We built it because my wife thought I was an idiot for not doing it, and it was by having dialogues with her and asking questions to her and then realizing what the pains of a grassroots leader was, that we decided that the first thing we decided to do was actually build a capacity building vertical. And it's thanks to that now if I look at the things we do in capacity building, we've trained 2,800 leaders via 15 different programs. I know Common Purpose got mentioned in the prior session, but there are 14 other programs that we worked with, and 2,800 leaders in 1,500 NGOs have got trained. And we believe a lot in training leaders. We believe also in scaling, platforms, be it platforms like Give India or IDR or CSIP. I mean, these are all things that we've been involved in, building and supporting from the early stage, mainly because we felt that the sector needs platforms that's small, medium size and large NGOs, all of them can benefit in order to be able to grow. So we've, over the last, I would say 15 years, increasingly now encouraged other donors also to enter that space, because we want to make sure that the resources available are a multiple of what they have been available when we started. And we are very, very happy. We just did a review last week. We've seen now that from when we started, there are at least 15 new players now who are funding capacity building initiatives. And importantly now, I think CSR recognizes that they need to fund capacity as well. I was hearing that in the previous session. I do feel NGOs on the other side, he was making a very relevant point, they need to also ask, and they need to also be aware. Lots of times, when I've had conversations with NGO leaders, they often don't ask for help, and they often, will not build a capacity building component into their funding proposals. And I think it's very important for people to ask the question. I often ask people that, have you pointed out to your donor that if they are a user of soap, whether when they bought that soap, did they ask what the salary of the MD was, or how much research money was spent on making that soap, or how much distribution commission the outlet took when selling? If they don't, if the answer to those questions will all be no, they will understand if you're asking for 10%, right? I mean, you have to put it in language that donors will also understand. So if you simplify that language, everyone who's reasonably logical gets it. And I've generally realized that more and more people are beginning to get that language. I think more people need to ask, and I have seen a lot of people now cross over and start giving, but I think more people need to start asking as well. And certainly I think what people like us need to do is we need to start doing things that we were not doing earlier. So earlier we were building funding platforms, we were building knowledge platforms, we were building training platforms. Now we are thinking of building technology platforms, we are thinking of M&E platforms. So we are also changing what other people are not doing, we're trying to do now.
It's very good to hear. In fact, I think it's an input to the NPO sector leaders actually, that I think it is fundamental and primarily we need to ask. It's now up to us what we need to understand, what are our capacity building needs are, the training needs are and systemic needs are, and then express it. But probably I think unfortunately we are still haunted by our past experiences when many a times donor kind of rejected that kind of the request. In fact, in my own personal case, when we went, proposed a capacity building requirement, the donor, reacted, see, in fact, we are giving you this project because thinking that you have this capacity. But if you are asking me this, the same money to build that capacity, why should I come to you? That was the question they asked. Okay, probably I think this kind of past experiences, NGO sector has to come out and probably put forth the requirements actually. Now I'll probably engage with Mr. Arjun Ranga and probably give some couple of minutes break to you. As someone involved with philanthropic initiatives, in fact, I know personally that you have been donating to various causes as a family, as an individual. How do you see the relationship between corporate philanthropy and grassroots organization is evolving? Of course, we are celebrating 10 years of the CSR. Actually, what probably we might have learned, and it is evolving. The corporates willing to invest in long-term community-centric initiatives, or it is still a preference for short-term impact project? I'm very consciously using the word impact, the way they many a times some corporates use actually 1 year impact, the kind of a thing actually. So what is your take on this?
Firstly, greatly honored to share the dais with you. Impact, I'd like to say that you are my earlier generation. So, the generation has set, which includes my father and uncles before me, is truly inspiring to my generation. Okay, and then we have the next generation that's coming after us. The entrepreneurial spirit of the nation, I think, is at the cusp of just catapulting. Social impact entrepreneurship, we're seeing social entrepreneurship is, on the get-go. You look at the US, I think 1984 they were, I think, a $4 trillion economy, more or less where we are. And what prevents us in the next 20 years to scale the way the US did? So India, the next 25 years is just going to be amazing. You'll see growth stories across the board. There will be so many people who want to make the difference to this country, because the country will start giving back to us like never before. And I think NPOs can really play a significant role in transforming the dreams that we all had for a better India and a better tomorrow. And you'll see contributions across the board, from HNIs creating bigger war chests for contributing. You'll start seeing corporates going beyond just their 2%, because I'm now seeing that a lot of companies are moving towards becoming more a purpose-led brand than a vision-led brand. And we want to make a difference, and we want to make an impact. So I think NPOs need to actually understand long-term vision and purpose of organizations, align with the organization's goals and interests, and then customize products and packages that align with long-term vision. What's typically happening, exactly like what Mr. Amit said, a lot of NPOs are stuck with who they are, right, and are not willing and are not flexible to understand what is required. And also, one of the bigger initiatives that we went and did, and it's just an example, about 6-7 years ago, I wanted to do something for water management in Mysore. So we worked with a local NPO and then said, okay, let us revive 2 big lakes, because Mysore has so many lakes, let's revive lakes. It's a small sum, some 40 lakhs we invested, 20 lakhs each for each lake. We got the entire lakes redone, beautifully done, walkway around the lake, all of that, and then we put fish in and the lakes were revived, beautiful, everything was done. But the NGO forgot to actually integrate with the local community. So in 6 months' time, the local Tehsildar connected the local area's drainage pipe into that water. So the entire initiative went for a toss. Right, so NPOs today are kind of becoming agnostic of the local community. They're looking at projects, they're looking at value, they're measuring short-term impact. So the moment you look at short-term impact, you're also looking at short-term projects only. So with me, what I've realized is most NPOs need to take an approach of looking at a long-term community impact initiative that is demonstrated to a short-term project that demonstrates impact. So you kind of pilot with a short-term project that then scales into a long-term initiative where you actually get capacity building done through the organization that you're working with, through volunteers from the company. Volunteerism is increasing tremendously. So any initiative that my company now partakes in, we have a lot of people who are stepping up from our company who are saying, we will step in. My supply chain guy has actually stepped in to say, I'll help integrate the NPO supply chain.
My CFO is saying, I'll come and help the NGOs, finance management better. So capacity building is, I think, quintessential for the growth that the country is going to take. And if an NPO says, I will build my capacity on my own, it's not going to happen, it's not even tenable. Because the amount of effort and initiative that you have to invest in it is not going to be, practically possible. You have to work with organizations that are willing to partner with you for the long term through short-term projects where you can actually demonstrate impact. Impact assessment is a given. PR, learning how to do PR, making a 1-minute reel is also a given, okay, in this generation and the generation next. And social awareness is increasing so much, and we are a giving nation, right? I think crowdsourcing is an amazing tool. Technology will enable it a lot more, and we will see that becoming a very, very soon reality, where you can collect funds en masse, right, with short-term projects and impact that will help you do long-term sustainable projects. So adding to what Mr. Amit Chandra said, it's going to be amazing in this country. Okay? There will be funding aplenty. You need to learn how to tell stories and stories of impact. You need to actually demonstrate change with short-term projects that lead into long-term community commitments. And engaging with the local community is a given, no matter who you are, what you are. That's the only way it can sustain in the long term. That's my 2 bits.
That's interesting points, actually. Of course, I have a couple more questions, but I think the guest on the other side here are not going to spare me if I keep asking the question and not giving an opportunity to interact, actually. So now the floor is open for all the audience to have your questions. Talk to Mr. Chandra and Mr. Ranga.
National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience in psychiatric social work specifically. So my question is with regard to implementation of Mental Health Care Act only. There is section 18 particularly which says that mental health care and treatment needs includes aftercare, running the long stay home, those kind of facilities which the government of the day has to do. It is a statutory obligation under the Parliamentary Act which is enacted after India's signatory of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities there. So if it is an international obligation, we are falling below, and there are court monitorings also on those issues where the learned additional chief secretaries of various states are made parties, and they find very difficult. And there are some NGOs, I will come to briefly to my question after telling short context. So the issue is, sir, the Mental Health Care Act says that only mental health professionals are clinical psychologists, psychiatric social worker or psychiatrists who are duly qualified. So if any NPOs or the NGOs have to serve to that particular field, at least they have bare minimum which the legislation requires them to serve to the community. Any kind of volunteer may help them to resource mobilization, etc., but the services has to be given to qualified person, and these qualified person will obviously ask some salary. Even district mental health program, those success also in Uttarakhand and other state, the issue is about mobilization of the resources. If the psychiatrists from prominent institutions are studying there, at least 1,10,000 will be the minimum, bare minimum they have all, like they want to serve to the country, but that is the bare minimum they want. So how this NPO can come and help the country where there is a clinical establishment act, mental health care rules, they have to obtain proper permission. So we don't want to do disservice by service. So what is the solution? Because you have touched some of the points. These are the problem I am putting because you are the expert. You have to lead this country and help us to get through this, because a lot of people with homelessness, long stay patient will be rehabilitated in that. Thank you.
Thought about that.
Out of my area of expertise, but I know there is a seminal event happening this weekend in Bangalore, which is a convening on exactly this topic by the Rohini Nilankani Philanthropies, and many experts in mental health are getting together to discuss issues which I suspect are very similar to what you've talked about. They're getting together, NGOs across the country, philanthropists across the country. Unfortunately, while I was invited, I couldn't be there. And I don't know whether it's an open forum. If it is, I would urge you to basically go there, and I'm sure issues like this, given it does sound like a very serious issue, will probably be better covered in that forum than in this forum.
Thank you.
I think mental health is a very, very serious issue that our country faces and will continue to face in the future.
For us as well as a family, mental health is extremely personal as well. So we've set up depression treatment clinics. We just started 4. We have 2 in Delhi, 2 in Bangalore right now. It's called Mindful TMS Neurocare, where we do magnetic stimulation treatment for people with depression. So I'll get your contact. I'll speak to our department heads and see if we can allocate some part of it for mental health care for the underprivileged. We have not done that, but I think it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. Well, and I like the point that you mentioned with whatever the limited fund of 2 to 5% that can be actually used for creating some R&D and see, we are doing similar work actually. We have invented something called a mobile planetarium, a portable planetarium, and we have also integrated a virtual reality inside the dome, and it is meant to be taken to the last mile of the country. And we have reached quite a good number of schools in the rural India, pan India. The biggest challenge that we're facing is whoever is donating, they want us to do it around the metros, the cities, because they have a visibility, that is one thing, and also they can showcase that. And for an NGO also, it is easier for them to execute it if it is nearby cities. And actually, if you actually look at Karnataka, already Karnataka is skewed because the capital is the south, and the north is totally left out. And there are so many number of schools which are like, don't even have a good teacher. And these are the real challenges like we're facing. How do we address this? Thank you, sir.
This is literally, I think, something I hear. I travel a lot across the country and I hear this so often I can't tell you. And I think the best way to address this problem is that organizations need to build one very, very important muscle. Well, actually it's 2 muscles. The first muscle is to be able to document something in a manner that is credible. Okay, it's not an easy muscle to build. Okay, and I say that knowing fully well that I've seen a lot of organizations struggle. And the second is to, after having documented that, to be able to go out and tell that story on a platform where the hope is that it will stick and resonate, and you don't know where exactly it will resonate. Okay. Now, the reason I say that is that I fully understand that often you get funding from someone who's very, very parochial, i.e. they care about impact which is in their backyard. Okay, most CSR donors unfortunately are like that. They are funding things because they care about showing something to a particular constituency. Okay, foundations may think about things a little bit differently. Retail donors care probably the least, right? But as NGO leaders, often you care more about the cause, right? Which is every child may be alike to you. The pain of a woman in one state may be the same as the pain of a woman in another state, right? And so when you document something and you show that your solution works, and you do that in a credible way, and then you go onto a platform and you tell that story, right? You will be surprised that it could resonate either with another NGO leader somewhere else, or an IAS officer who's reading it. That IAS officer could be in a state government, or it could be in the central government, and that's ultimately how change basically gets viral, right? And I'm not talking something theoretical, I'm talking something practical. We've seen this happen a lot, and ultimately to facilitate all this, this is exactly why we are investing in platforms like IDR, right? IDR, when it originally came to us as an idea, was a small idea, and today it has 1 million viewers a month, right? So when you document something and you put it on a platform like IDR, you know that it's going to be read by many people who hopefully can do something with that idea, right? And it's important, and today, of course, other than idea, the power of YouTube and Instagram and everything else is enormous. But I would encourage, every NGO to invest in these two capabilities to be able to make impact which is far, far beyond their backyard.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm really not feeling like we should end this conversation and conclude here. You have something to...
Yeah, I think just to add to what Mr. Amit just mentioned, see, we run a school for blind girl children from last 32 years, okay? And we have quite a few girl children who have passed through the school, and our focus predominantly the long term for the family, and our foundation is girl children, educating girl children with disabilities and underprivileged. Predominantly we focused on that. And mostly in Mysore, where we are from, we said we'll first help our community do what best we can in this surrounding area where we are present. I think one of the NGOs has done a detailed analysis of what we've been doing, focusing on girl children. They prepared a presentation and come and said we can actually make an impact in Tamil Nadu, in one of the districts where there are about 40 girl children who are visually impaired, where we can actually make a difference, and then we did the presentation and we went ahead and did it. So they aligned their goals to what we wanted. You created a device and you say, okay, now I want to take this device to North Karnataka, you please give me money to go to North Karnataka. And nobody is actually going to do that. You need to align yourselves with people or organizations who are aligned with educating government school children, educating, and then align your process, like what Sir said, with stories, with actual stories, and then go and pitch. Because quite a few NGOs have come and talked to us and said, give us money, but then not with a clear direction or a story or an impact study or what can make a difference in that community. And so we are now doing projects both in Andhra Pradesh as well as Tamil Nadu, exactly aligned with what we want to do in our long-term goal. Okay, and they're creating stories for us in that community as well, that we can tell in our bigger goal.
Thank you, Mr. Arjun. Yeah, one last question.
I am Meenakshi from Tamahar Trust. We work in the space of childhood disability, developmental delays due to brain damage. The children we work with are moderate to severely affected. My question is, when talking about impact, donors, they want impact numbers, they want success stories. For me, for a success story, success means if a child look at its mother and tells, Amma, it is the greatest of success for us. We cannot run Olympics or take first rank. So how this impact really matters to a donor, I wanted to know. Also about numbers, they are keen on giving to education. We supported 1,500 students, 2,000 students. We will have 80 students, 100 students with their families. So that is how much we can do. So how do donors see this, and what are you having to say for this, sir?
What's your name again? I'm so sorry.
Meenakshi.
Meenakshi.
Yes.
Meenakshi, thank you so much for the work you do. My wife has been doing this for 70. If they do it because there's no one in their family who's been impacted by it. Because
Sir, this cause is very close to my heart. I am a mother of a special child. He has got multiple disabilities with intellectual disabilities. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so,
you are really right.
Yeah, so I visit her school often, and it's the oldest institution in the country which does work in this space. So this is a cause which is very dear to both her and my heart. And this question, I've heard her answer this question very often to donors, and I know when she took over the organization, it was close to bankruptcy. It was very difficult to meet ends meet, and now it has a corpus, and the journey to that has been answering questions exactly like this. My learning, so my answer is not my original, my answer is the answer that she gives. I think change in all these cases is often the change that happens in the lives of the families as opposed to the lives of just the child, because often what people underestimate is how much making a child very simply functional, which often most people underestimate what that can mean from a principle of inclusion or from a principle of independence to a mother or a father or a brother or a sister. And I'm sure you understand that, but I don't know how much all of us would. I certainly didn't when my wife started working in the area. Often when you have a child with special needs, it means multiple members of the family often have to stay at home and can't step out. And that obviously means a financial burden, it means a social burden on the child. And so to be able to explain to donors that when you often over a period of many years are able to make that child slightly more independent, you're really transforming the life of a family and not just of a child. That is impact. I think then people start really getting it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful thoughts. Friends, I know, so we have a lot more to discuss, lot more to kind of exchange our thoughts and ideas. But of course, there's a time in the tea break now, soon after this session, and we'll have to start the main event. And here I conclude for now. And thank you so much for your engaging discussion and participation. And over to Tanya for the further proceedings.
I know we all need a break, but before we do break for tea, we would like to honor a long-time special supporter who's been with us all through these 10 years. I invite Ms. Fatima before that, I also request Mr. Arjun Ranga to kindly present Mr. Amit Chandra with a token of our appreciation. Yeah.